Hello, Angel and Andrea. This is Michelle. I'm going to go through the response feedback score that was of concern to you and see if an explanation of it might be helpful at this point. Perhaps not, but I'm willing to give it a try. So, we have the activity observation. This is Angel's copy, but Andrea's is the same. So it seems okay to just go through one of them. And I understand you updated due to the change in your student group, which I totally understand and tried to be sympathetic and supportive about. It's hard to lose a team member in the middle of the game. So that's okay. We worked that part out, and on November 12th, you sent an email at 6:44 p.m. about what you were planning to do the next morning. And I have that email in a separate document along with the printed out document that you sent me about your plans. So you updated your plans and sent me an email on November 12th at 6:44. That document is going to be attached to what I submit to Dr. Adams so that she has, and you have all the records of that. The document I'm going to attach is the one that I showed you on the morning of November 13th. That was my way of trying to explain why I thought you were going to be in the room to set up at 9:25. So that's the document I'm referring to, but you'll be able to see that. So I could not mark that you had arrived ahead of time to set up the activity and note any updates or changes because I hadn't seen you at the time you told me you would be there. You arrived at 9:40 and I was waiting outside the classroom at about 9:30, and I went in and I was surprised when Catherine said you all weren't there yet because I had marked down that you were arriving at 9:25, and that's what it says in the document you sent me. So I was, surprised, but not really too concerned, to be honest. 5 minutes is not that big of a deal. So Catherine is the teacher, and she assisted you with setting up and discussed with you what you wanted, and she got it out for you and helped you set it up at the table. And I observed that process. My expectation would have been that you would have arrived, known where the materials would be, gotten them out yourselves, put them in where they belonged yourselves, and that Catherine would not have needed to be involved at all. In fact, before you got started and arrived, she asked me, what is my role in this situation? And I said, your role is to do what you would normally do in your classroom at this time, and the students are to come in and take care of everything themselves. This is an independent assignment, and the expectation is that they have made arrangements to do this and have everything ready to go, and they will set it up and implement it. And I asked her to please not do anything special, just go about her business as the teacher of the classroom. Of course, if there were little things that needed assistance, like maybe somebody's name or something like that, obviously that would be fine. However, what I was not expecting to see was that Catherine was getting the materials out and you all were helping to set it up, but that it was not done independently. And I have in my notes that I was a little concerned because she was discussing the type of paper you were going to use that morning. And I thought all of that had been decided. I was informed that Andrea was going to talk to Catherine because she was at work and could do that easily. That's great. I have no issues with that whatsoever. My concern was that what I observed did not look like you two students were the ones that you knew where the materials were, you knew what materials you were going to put out, and that you put them out, and Catherine was not in the area, let alone doing it. So that was my concern there. Maybe you didn't understand that expectation, but that was the expectation, and certainly that standard was applied to every other student who implemented an activity. So in my mind, I could not say that the materials were prepared and available prior, because they were available, but not because of what you had planned. You did not walk in the room ready to pull out knowing where everything is, pulling it out without any assistance from Catherine. And that was a big concern for me. If you're a teacher in a classroom and you're responsible for implementing an activity at a center, it's your responsibility to have the materials prepared and ready to roll. So it's not a problem that the ELC was generous enough to help you with that by letting you use their materials. However, I would not have expected Catherine to be assisting you in setting it up and asking you what kind of paper you needed. My concern in my notes about the paper was that I had already advised you previously not to use certain kinds of paper if you were going to do the type of painting activity you had planned, because the paper would tear. And in the end, that was what Catherine had to deal with. She also had to find you the stacked pieces, drying rack pieces for the art. You had not prepared for that. She had to put them on the drying rack pieces initially and get that all set up for you. That had not been prepared. She had to talk to you about the paper tearing and that sort of thing. So this was a big concern for me. I had already discussed this with you in my feedback, and I felt as though what I was observing was that Catherine was providing you with a lot of what you needed, that you had not set up your activities so that you already both knew where everything was that you needed and could get it independently. That was my concern. It was nice of Catherine to be of help to you, and I think it was smart of her to be of help to you, because the children were needing that support, as were you. So I have no problem that Catherine was kind and helped you. However, that wasn't what the assignment was. Both of you should have known exactly where everything was so that you could come in independently and set that up. If you are not bringing your own materials, that would be the expectation. You decided to use ELC materials, and that's fine, by arrangement, which you did, which is great. However, that's not what happened that I observed. You do not need to involve Catherine in any kind of validation of anything whatsoever. All of this is based on my observations of what happened and the notes that I took for documentation. I just want to be really clear about that. Your stated accommodations and modifications would have been available. They weren't needed, and I didn't observe them, but I gave you a check on that because it was clear they could have been. You did a great job of interacting with the kids at the table while they were there. I appreciated that, and I checked that. I checked that you did not interrupt their play. You did a great job. This was one, like I said, it was excellent. You introduced the materials to the kids just fine. That went well. You used great guiding questions when you did do it, and this was definitely one of the highlights of this. So here are my concerns as I've outlined them here. When you came up, and I was already sitting outside because Catherine had told me you weren't there yet, and I asked you about it, your initial response was to say that you had never told me you would be there at 9:25. And I thought, oh, wow, I totally goofed here. I'm so sorry, right? So I went into my papers to see, why did I think this was the case? And I found, sure enough, I found the document you had sent me the night before saying you were going to be there and that you were going to be getting everything out and setting up. So I had a concern that rather than saying, I'm sorry or something like that, your immediate response was to say that you had never said you would be there at that time. And then when I showed you, this is what you said, and this is why I thought it, because I wanted you to know that I looked it up because I wanted to be respectful of your statement that you didn't tell me that. I thought maybe I had goofed. Then you proceeded to tell me that there wasn't anything you could help because you had to park and you didn't want to have to get towed or, that sort of thing. Well, of course, nobody wants that. I totally understand that. However, as I said to you that day, those are the sorts of things that I expect are taken care of and that you have thought through before you arrive. Now, if something would have happened that was unpredictable, of course, that's more than fair. But my concern was that your interactions with me were initially to deny that you had told me you'd be there. And then your second response was, well, it wasn't really our fault. So that's an unprofessional way to deal with a teacher in a professional setting. And I had a concern about that. I also have stated here that I had a serious concern about the need for the teacher's direct involvement. That was, as I've already explained, not appropriate for this activity. So I felt like I had already told you about the paper that was needed and all of that. I have tried really hard to give you points where you deserved them. However, as I said here, overall, this lesson would really need to be redone to be taken seriously. It just was not enough of your own doing. The teacher did far too much. This is not something she needs to discuss with us. It's not up to her to say whether she felt she had to do too much. I just want to be really clear about that because I know you've contacted her and she's written back about it. And it's just not appropriate. It's what I observed that is the standard for this score. And I'd want to make that really clear. It's not up to Catherine to say whether I'm right or not. If she feels she didn't have to do that much, that's great. But that's not what I observed. So I'm sorry if that's disappointing to you and confusing. But it is, in fact, my role to be an observer, to be objective, and to write what I saw happening. As I was making notes, I was documenting every time she had to engage to keep this activity floating. She did not leave the table or that space the entire duration of the activity, except to go get children for you. And so that was the reason for this score and for my assessment of it. And all I can do is say, I'm sorry that it went that way. And I'm sorry that you feel disappointed about the score. But I did try to give you points for the things you did do well. So that is my feedback, explanation of this score. And I hope it gives some clarity